Hello, everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Jams and Tea podcast, where we spit the jams and spill the tea. And today we're talking about two brand new releases. We are talking about the first big album release of the year. We are going to be talking about the latest album from A$AP Rocky, first album in 8 years. Don't Be Dumb is officially here, and we're also going to be talking about an obscure black metal band that nobody has heard of and nobody cares about except for me, because we are going to be talking about the latest release from Serpent Column, their new album, AION of Strife. First, Serpent Column is a black metal band that picked up a lot of steam in the late 2010s. It is kind of in this growing, burgeoning scene of online extreme music that tends to blend just the most abrasive genres of music together. Things like black metal and dissonant death metal and industrial music and mathcore, shoving it all together. And very often the case is that these bands are one-person projects. A lot of these are kind of DIY and have a very sort of digital aesthetic to them. And so they're a bit controversial just because some people in the black metal community are still beating the drum of, unless my black metal sounds like it was recorded by a toaster, then it's bad and you should feel bad. But to me, I've always found some of these interesting because they really do push at the limitations of extreme music in ways that I find fascinating and ways that have a lot of musical complexity and a lot of just interesting ideas that I feel like can only be explored by pursuing extremities. And one of my favorite bands in this scene, in fact, probably my favorite band in this scene, is in fact Serpent Column, which is spearheaded by one man who goes by Theophonos, whose real name I believe is Jimmy Hamzy, which, yeah, I mean, I guess I would call myself Theophonos if my name was Jimmy Hamzy also. But he has released some stuff in the last couple of years under his solo name, and people were under the impression that Serpent Column was over, disbanded, or just had evolved into his solo stuff, and then released an album called The Tassel of Ares in, I believe, 2024, which was fantastic, but everyone was like, oh, so Serpent Column's active again, I guess. And then we kind of got this dumped in our laps. And it's been accompanied by some interesting things, mainly in that the reception to this album has been decidedly a lot more mixed than his recent projects and just really his entire catalog, which has been received very, very well by the internet at large and communities like Rate Your Music. This, on the other hand, it's not doing quite as well, to the point where Theophonos himself has even sent out emails to people on his mailing list and people who follow his Bandcamp and stuff that, he's basically apologized for the fact that the production on this album sounds like, well, that it was recorded with a toaster, and kind of went into detail as to why, Serpent Column and Theophonos were different, and how there was kind of some speculation around Serpent Column disbanding because there was a collaborator for those records who was not listed in the credits to the newer Theophonos projects, and people were like, oh, is this just one of those weird antisocial black metal guys breaking up with people who was in his band and then he's like moving on? And turns out that is not the case. She just did the drum programming for some of his stuff and then left, and now it's basically a one-man show. And I guess, if anything, I'm very sad that this is the first official capacity we could talk about this record, because while there is a lot worth paying attention to on here, and while I do think that I would say that this is an interesting record, it is probably the worst record to listen to try and get somebody interested in this field of music. Because the thing with Serpent Column is that with each release that was always presaged by an EP, there was some kind of production style that Jimmy was adopting that, again, really pushed at the limits of what this sound was and what it was capable of. And on albums like Mirror and Darkness, Canon Jake 10 out of 10 record, it does some of the most interesting things with any strain of this genre has ever tried to dabble in. It is overwhelming, it is oppressive. I went back and listened to it just to sort of compare it to this album, and you listen to the opening on Mirror in Darkness, and it feels like you are being punched in the face by 17 heavyweight boxers all at the same time. And it's like it is so overwhelming that it just stimulates this masochistic part of my brain that responds to heavy music like this. And I won't lie, I feel like we have finally reached the threshold of this genre of music where I think the extremes that we've been pushing at have finally found a limit. So Jen is somebody who just I just tossed you like frying pan into the fire doesn't even begin to describe this shit. I tossed you into a fucking volcano with this album. How the fuck did you react to this?
And you're also coming to this prepared with the full like ontological report of the scene and the environment by which
Hmm.
this album arrived. Meanwhile, I just got a very cryptic message about that this would be the assignment for this week, and then I listened to it, and so I'm going to tell you what that experience was like.
Go ahead.
So when I'm listening to records for this show in my office, I listen to them at different volumes depending on what I'm listening to in particular. And so when I turn on Phenomenology of the Assault, it starts out so like fuzzy and compressed and the guitar's really high in the mix.
Hmm.
And I was just like, huh. But my brain was kind of being tricked by how low my speakers were set. And I was like, huh, the guitars are oddly back heavy in this mix here, and then I turn it up a little bit, and then I started hearing the obviously a very big difference in what the song actually sounds like when I put enough of it towards me, which is really, really, really heavy guitars towards the front, and then a very, very subtle, fuzzy rhythm section towards the back of the mix. And the whole record just kind of sounds like that, and that provides some interesting moments of aesthetic, but it's well documented that one of the things that just kind of bounce off of me with this genre is most of these bands' approaches to lyricism. And so not having anything there to latch onto with this one either, I basically the only thing I can do to evaluate this is tell you what I think of some of these melodies and what I think of some of the mixing and the mastering on this. And what I can tell you is that there are moments on this album like on Descent Without Nadir where there's a very sharp contrast in the, slower guitar playing underneath a faster rhythm section. And that song in particular has a moment where it becomes kind of like a mathcore take on a spaghetti western duel, when it slows
Yeah.
down towards the middle there that I thought was kind of interesting. But after that, there's not a whole lot here for me to really latch onto. I enjoy some of the groovier parts of the last leg of Prayer of the Pneumatic. I enjoy the moment of Flight of the Last Gods where that song really kicks into gear. But
Second half of that song really was the standout moment on the album to me, where I was just like, damn, say what you will about the man. He can play a fucking guitar.
yeah, there's a lot of impressive guitar playing and a lot of impressive melodies, but the song construction is for me where this album is lacking beyond a pure aesthetic experience of, the idea of danger music and black metal and mathcore and whatever you want to call it. The idea of actively experiencing that is one thing, but the idea of actively experiencing interesting music is another.
And, I think it is a testament to your open-mindedness that you did not absolutely loathe this experience in its entirety, frankly, because I was fully prepared for that to be the case. Just because, I mean, if I had to say what I think of this album as somebody who is quite into this scene, quite into this band, it contains a lot of, again, interesting aesthetic exercises that are just a bit drowned in the kind of hazy wash that is this mix. And I feel like, it was kind of
We're doing the
relieving.
thing. The mixing. Oh, I
The
can't
mixing.
stand the mixing.
And that's the thing, though. If somebody listens to this album and then goes for it, they'll be like, oh, okay, I understand why they complained about the mixing because it is so obvious. You don't need to have a background in music production to know the mixing on this album is to put it bluntly, ass. Like, it sounds bad. That's just, and I have no doubt in my mind that it is intentionally the way that it is, because the thing is that these extremes have been pushed at in previous Serpent Column albums. In fact, the one that was released before Tassel of Ares, I felt like was a great point to end the project at, because it was the logical conclusion where a lot of the ideas on Mirror and Darkness were extended and pushed so beyond the pale on that record that I was like, I don't know how he goes further after this. I simply don't think that it's possible considering the tools at his disposal. And that's why I dug his solo shit so much, is because it kind of felt like he was working sideways from that and doing some new, interesting things that I was getting along with quite well. There was some more grindcore influences and, again, more industrial leanings that I thought were really great. Riley even enjoyed the first album that he put out. So, there is some appeal in some of this that I feel like is not completely beyond the pale, just sort of like you can't like understand why anyone would listen to this. But this album in its entirety just ends up being a little bit less than the sum of its parts, because even though I can recognize things I like about each one of these songs and even love about some of these songs, is that they have a ceiling. And when it doesn't really all congeal together, because, like, the whole bit with Serpent Column is that this music and what it is about, and I mean, I've read interviews with Jimmy talking about this, is that Serpent Column's music is about just kind of the despair at the excess of society, just a kind of reaction to how overwrought capitalism globally has destroyed the world. And that is why with each Serpent Column release, you feel the extremity being pushed further and further with this kind of digital sound. And I appreciate it a lot. In fact, the final Serpent Column album, again, before the revival, was an album that had to grow on me, because half of it, I was just like, some of this is just almost completely sonically illegible. But the more I listened to it, the more I was able to pick up on some stuff that I was like, I really do feel the evolution of somebody who's like, I feel the capitalistic excess creeping up on me and getting worse and worse, so I will manifest it in my music. And this continues in that tradition. It really does. And in fact, I think that if that's the goal, this album is a success. It's just that that's kind of the only real way I think this album is an overwhelming success. Because, yeah, sure, it does make you feel the way that I feel like it's supposed to. It's just that it's kind of a novelty act, because, again, the vocal presence on this, even though a lot of the vocals on previous Serpent Column albums are like, you can't understand what the man is saying. You got to look at a lyric sheet. It's fucking impossible. But it adds a texture. There is something to listening to black metal like this, where you're hearing somebody and you can't really understand them, but you still feel the emotion. You feel the texture. You feel somebody helplessly wailing and just sort of screeching, but you can't understand them. And the fact that you can't understand them is kind of the point. It's that, oh, this person is so helpless, they can't even properly be heard.
Can
And
I jump
that's,
on that with a similar experience that I
please.
just had earlier today? I've been rewatching Twin Peaks. You know this. I mentioned
Yes,
this
you
in
finished
a
season
past
two.
video or two. This morning we watched Fire Walk with Me, and there's that moment.
Oh,
The way that you're describing this makes me think of a reaction that I had to a moment in Fire Walk with Me, where they're in the party across the border with the where notoriously the scene is mixed in a way where the music is so loud and the
very.
dialogue is dampened to basically a minimum, but
Hmm.
most of the dialogue has subtitles in the same way that the otherworldly characters do, to help provide context beyond the aesthetic experience of what you're watching. But there's a moment where when Laura sees Donna kind of giving into this moment that she's having with this stranger. All the dialogue up until this point has had subtitles underneath it, but as soon as she charges over to where Donna is and starts trying to pull her away, that is not captioned, but you can still see like Laura's lips moving and you can hear it just enough that you can make out some of what's there. And that's the experience that I want to have with trying to penetrate something like this. And I didn't get anywhere near that moment of insight or even curiosity here.
Nah, it's just because I feel like every other album that has been put out under this name does that. expertly. It does that about as well as anything I've ever heard. And I listen to a hell of a lot of black metal where you can't fucking understand the lyrics. And sometimes that's capitalized on well in this scene, sometimes it isn't. And this is just one of those instances where, like, the vocals are so buried here that you can't even really tell what they are. And again, that is artistically in line with what he is pursuing. It's just, again, that's got mileage, that's got a limitation built into it. And even as somebody super into this, it's just not something that feels rich or rewarding. I very much preferred how he was working before, where he was, again, trying to sidestep creatively a bit and try and do new interesting things and branch out a little bit. Whereas this pursuit of extremity has finally kind of yielded a zero-sum game. So I'm kind of disappointed that the first official capacity we could talk about this is one that I literally just can't recommend to like fucking anybody. Like, even if you listen to black metal like this, it doesn't really hit the same. Like, the way you listen to this, it starts feeling like the way you listen to shoegaze because it's so cloudy, it's so compressed, it's so hazy. It kind of lacks impact. And again, what I love about Mirror in Darkness is being punched by 16 heavyweight boxers in the face without reprieve. So there is a lot lost here. I recognize a lot of greatness, a lot of really good instrumental proficiency, but this is unfortunately just an example of something being much less than the sum of its parts.
Unfortunately, yeah.
So, like, I don't even really think this album is like bad or anything, but like, I can't give it a
Yeah.
thumbs up, you know?
Yeah.
My
I did
advice
not
is,
enjoy the experience. That's
yeah,
my summary of the whole
I
thing.
would, if you're interested in this, go listen to one of those Serpent Column albums, some of those Theophonos records. I know the band Telos is also very big in this scene. I listened to one of their albums a couple of years ago and it was fantastic. There's a lot of albums in this scene right now, and I feel like they are a little bit more deserving of your time, unfortunately. Now, let's move on to ASAP Rocky's Don't Be Dumb. As I mentioned, first album since 2018's testing, very hotly anticipated. I feel like it is very difficult for me to remember a time before everyone complaining that there hasn't been a new ASAP Rocky album, just
Same.
because it's like, again, that was when I first got into music, and every year that's passed, everybody's like, man, when's Rocky gonna drop something? And we kind of talked about this in when we talked about Whole Lotta Red, in that the hype culture of these albums is a double-edged sword, in that it builds anticipation for interesting new music and it gets a lot of people involved, it gets a lot of people talking, and that's what we thrive on. But it also has the potential to like actually negatively impact the overall reception, the overall way things are talked about, if we just kind of abandon the nuance and pursue 100% hype. Then we're probably going to exist in a world where every album is going to be Whole Lotta Red, and the process of making it is so embedded into complaining about not getting it that that's what the album just inevitably balloons into, and that shit's exhausting. Like, I really hate that. Like, letting hype turn into this kind of cancer, really, it sucks. And that's why, thankfully, it seems I've really, I'm not super plugged into the discussion on this album just because I wanted to form my own opinion on it, but it doesn't seem like that's really the case right now. But in the lead up to this, I do feel like the story of ASAP Rocky, like, it's very, very obvious where he's been in the last 8 years, because there's been a lot of drama with this guy. And not even because of anything Rocky's done. It's just that there's been a lot of legal stuff between him and friends of his in the ASAP mob. Him trying to make the ASAP mob in general more of a name and more of a brand. And not really succeeding, because ASAP Rocky really does feel like the most successful member of the ASAP mob by a considerable distance. Not to mention, we had the death of, I believe it was ASAP Yams in the 2010s. I can't remember exactly when that happened, but it did happen. It did impact him. He also got married. He also had kids. So I don't blame the guy for not dropping. And, he had a bunch of albums and he had his mixtape and he has released songs like that Taylor Swift song. And so he has been there. It's just that he's been on the edge of the discussion. So once this came around, I finally got to sort of get my feelings in order on ASAP Rocky and Don't Be Dumb on the whole. And I must admit, I've never been the biggest fan of the guy. And I don't say that to even say that I think that he makes bad music. It's that like that first mixtape, Long Live ASAP, is a collaboration between him and a lot of different producers at the time, but mainly Clams Casino, a guy who was responsible for a lot of big pop and rap production at the time. And man, those songs, like the first half of Live Love ASAP, God, it hits still. I do think it kind of drops off in the second half a little bit, not quite has the staying power of that first half, but I was into that. That's something I'll still go back to on occasion. Like Palace, Peso, amazing songs. His albums, they all kind of feel like they're either shooting for being more of a curated experience, like testing, where it's really more about assembling all the features together in a kind of Kanye-esque way, and then the other albums of his feel like they're trying to recapture that magic of the mixtape just without quite the aesthetic collision that made it so interesting. And so I've wanted to really like ASAP Rocky for a really long time because here's the thing, this man's really fucking good at rapping. Like if Don't Be Dumb gave me any takeaway, it's that I have been severely undervaluing just how good his pen is, just how good his flows are. Like when it comes to the art of rapping, he is an amazing all-rounder. There's nothing that I think he's truly bad or even mediocre at. Every way you can categorize a rapper, ASAP Rocky's good at it. And talk around this album, it's been divisive. And I feel like we kind of predicted it being divisive just because the single was divisive and the album art was crazy. We got art by Tim Burton that's being done on the cover here. And it's just there's a lot happening. So, Jen, what's your history with ASAP Rocky or just the ASAP mob in general? And going into this, how did you find such a interesting experiences? Don't Be Dumb, because I came away from this album a with a takeaway that I personally never would have predicted I would have.
Okay, I don't have a lot of experience with the ASAP mob actually. So I'm coming at this mostly from a person who's observed ASAP Rocky's celebrity not through his music but through everything else surrounding it. Like you said, the legal cases, him being involved in like the fashion industry as a model and a promoter for like not just
Hey,
Rihanna's
his face
brand, but like
card never
other
declines.
campaigns that he's done. He's been in movies that I've really liked. He's a really good actor. He's in a movie called Monster that I really, really love. He's in a movie called Dope, which I know a lot of people have seen.
Oh.
So people probably know that ASAP Rocky is good in front of the camera. But when Taylor Swift dropped, that was the moment where I was like, okay, if this is going to be the start of something for ASAP Rocky, we need to pay attention to it. And the thing that I ended up appreciating the most about this is where so many big albums from people as famous as ASAP Rocky have felt like rollouts of some kind of big commercial, big ticket item rather than a piece of art. I get a little bit frustrated.
Hmm.
But ASAP was able to ride that line by making Don't Be Dumb and the rollout surrounding it have much more of a mixtape feel to the way it was coming onto the scene. One, with a completely unrelated lead single in Taylor Swift, and two, by getting it out very early in the year by not waiting too long after that first single to do it, by hiding the features on the track list on the streaming versions until just recently. All of these things contribute to Don't Be Dumb having a surprisingly underground feel to it, where Rocky, I don't want to say that he ever had the idea in him, but Rocky could have gone full on Cardi B with this and announced this album 8 months ago with all the tracks already on it, and that might have killed the hype a little bit. But I think ASAP knew, and I mean, he even addresses it a couple points on the record. He knows that people were waiting on him to come back. And so he played a smart move, which was to not tease anybody too much with the return by announcing the album only a few days before it dropped, by teasing the Tim Burton collaboration, by keeping it about, there is a new album without giving too much away. I feel like those were all very good decisions. And then getting into the actual content of the music itself, I really like this record. And I think ASAP shows a lot of versatility on this record, which I think is key to what you were saying earlier about you kind of finding a new appreciation for him as a performer. I definitely found that here as well. There's a huge variety of, rap subgenre infusions and genre fusions on this and switching up the flow and using different regional influences. There's a lot of Dirty South on this, but there's also
Oh
like
yeah.
a bossa nova cut where he's whispering into the microphone, but it sounds great. And like he
Yeah.
he has a really good singing voice. And there was even controversy over the actual lead single to this punk rocky over, I saw a lot of negative reception toward that song. I really like punk rocky a whole lot, and
I really do too.
I didn't listen to it until we got into the context of the album, but I think it's really good, and I think something that we haven't really been talking about, or at least discussion that I haven't seen as much of, is that this is ASAP Rocky showing off a little bit more of a soft side as a person engaging in hip hop culture while still wanting to have this kind of high rung position in its echelon in a, I'm a real G type of way, but getting very sentimental and getting very emotional in certain places that make this a very interesting album experience. Like, I mean, Stay Here for Life really keyed me into this element of the record. I got a lot of Brockhampton vibes off of the introduction to this song in specific, and there's a couple of moments where there's just some very Brockhampton style vocal manipulation, repeated vocal melody stuff on this. And then it's interesting that again with the sequencing on this, Stay Here for Life transitions into Playa, but in between, there's this very funny monologue where he's like, if you think I'm a player, if you think I'm not like a man that cares about my family, da 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 da, you're just a hater, screw you, yada yada yada. But it ironically enough feels like a kind of soft puffing up of the chest, even.
Mhm.
Like he's not even really threatening these dudes. He's just kind of having this moment of vulnerability where he's experiencing the kind of shame of actually being a romantically inclined man. Having gotten to a point in his life where he fully owns that, but part of fully own that is telling people who are being parasocial about that to leave you the hell alone because
Yeah.
it's not a thing that influences, well, I mean, it is, but it's not a thing that changes how you want to exist in a genre space, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. What did you think about this as a longtime ASAP skeptic? And for me, as somebody who this is my first like full length ASAP experience, like, is this significantly different than his previous releases? How so? Like, walk me through how this is as a potential turn or what it adds to his oeuvre.
I think going into this, my number one fear was that this would just be another ASAP Rocky album. Because I won't lie, that is kind of what I felt from a couple of his releases in the past, where it sort of feels like he's trying to recapture the magic of coming onto the scene with this really big Southern hip hop, like chopped and screwed adjacent influence, like really just trying to do that with some diminishing returns. And, with this album being so anticipated and it being announced like, so long ago that, that ASAP Rocky was working on something, but we don't know what. And, him teasing an album for a long time. We don't know just how old all of this is. Some of it, like some of the content implies that it was probably recorded as soon as last year. Some of the content on here referencing stuff that was, going on as long as like 3 to 4 years ago. So who knows? But that was my fears that going into this, that we would just have all of this hubbub for another attempt of ASAP Rocky trying to recapture the past. And I was delighted that not only did that not happen, I'll stop beating this drum when it stops being a trend, but say it with me, kids. This is ASAP Rocky's hip hop maturation record. It's him arriving at a place in his life and discovering I'm not where I was when I started all of this. And not only that, But because he's been gone for so long, because he's changed so drastically, and because his life has evolved into where it is now, I feel like he recognizes that his audience does like the place where he's at and the place where his audience thinks he's at, there's a dissonance there. And he's very aware of that dissonance. And this is kind of his attempt to ingratiate, to be like, hey, I know you all were looking for music from a specific era, from a specific time in my life, and probably have expectations for that. But I'm not there anymore. I'm just not. I'm here instead. And what we get with Don't Be Dumb is, to my delight, kind of exactly the album I really desperately hoped this would be. Not in that I think it's a fucking masterpiece or anything. This album is, it's mixtape oriented and kind of a mess. Its flow is erratic, and it has some trouble like truly maintaining its momentum in a way that feels like it's cohesive. But in that, I see that ASAP Rocky is in fact a man of very many talents, synthesizing things together that I never would have predicted. Like again, the aforementioned bossa nova kind of jazz club moment that he's got at the end of the record, or the moment where one song early on in the track list, I think it might be Playa. It might be the end of Playa or the beginning of No Trespassing. I can't exactly remember, but there's basically a moment where the song derails itself and then becomes like this Dirty South 3-6 Mafia homage where the mixing sounds like the debut 3-6 Mafia record, and like the looped sort of beat happens, and I was just like, okay. And as somebody who's grown to really love Southern hip hop in the years since I first explored some of A$AP Rocky's stuff, it's actually made me be like, you know what? Maybe I should revisit some of his older stuff, because this guy really knows what he's doing when it comes to just an aesthetic idea. It's why I think Punk Rocky is a great fucking song, and why I also kind of think it was a lousy single choice, because if you were trying to get people excited about this album, Punk Rocky's not really an exciting song. It's a song where he's actually really thoughtfully meditating on how he's perceived and how he views himself as being different to where he was previously, than when, like, everybody was all, jazzed for A$AP Rocky to be a part of the scene. And there are just moments on this record where he just takes shots that are really ambitious and really strange, and he manages to land them really well. I think that the album starts and ends in places that I wouldn't say are huge highlights, but they are baseline, what I expected from a new A$AP Rocky album, in that they aren't doing anything that I think is super unique or special, but they are him doing what he does best in a way that I think is satisfying. Everything that between those bookends of the first two songs and the final song, I think this record's pretty fucking stellar, if I'm being honest with you. There are moments like, I think the album really starts to hit its stride at Stole Flow. And Stole Flow, let's call a spade a spade. This is a Drake diss. And I love how mean this song is. Look,
Yeah.
it's a matter of record that I'm an OG Drake hater. I was here before Kendrick was, if we want to be technical about things, but that's not actually
You
true.
can't say
I'm
that.
joking. I'm fucking joking. But this is just him proving that he still got fire. Like, just because he's older, just because he's in a place where he wants to experiment more and push himself artistically, and now that he's a little bit more comfortable as a person, he's still got it with him. Like, this is a song that is basically taking every open season shot at Drake that he possibly could have. And I'm sure that there's a lot that could be said about this, but like, I don't just think that Drake earned this because I don't like him. Drake has been weird about A$AP Rocky and Rihanna for a very long time.
Yeah, I
Like,
mean, everybody knows that Drake has been weird about Rihanna.
like
So,
she really is like his one that got away, and he just refuses to kind of let that die. And Rihanna's kind of continued not giving a fuck about anyone or anything, I think, just makes that like bigger. And I'm sure that Rocky feels a type of way about it. And let's also acknowledge the fact that people have been looking at Rocky weirdly just because he married Rihanna. Everyone like has this idea that he's some, like, they want to paint him as like this subservient beta male house husband that like, and I'm just like, look, whatever fiction you're inventing in your head to make this make sense, Like, dude, two really hot, really successful people married each other and like each other. I don't know why this is such a weird thing for you to like try and rationalize without doing this culture war bullshit, but like everyone has been weird about it. And he does kind of be like, "Hey, why are you all looking at me like this? Like, what is the deal with this? Because I don't understand it. But at the end of the day, I am who I am, and I'm gonna keep doing me, which is exactly how you're supposed to respond to weirdos doing weird shit. But like I can't believe that we have actually turned like, oh, a guy married Rihanna, and somehow that makes him
Somehow
like
that
a
guy is a loser.
yeah, like what a beta cuck. He married one of the hottest, most successful women on earth. Like, you guys are
What a
so,
pussy.
yeah, I was just gonna say, you guys are such pussies. Like, this is so stupid. And I have a kind of inherent respect that he's not like backing down, but simultaneously defending himself in a way that doesn't feel like he's just sort of taking cheap shots back. And this fire from this song, I feel like continues really, really strongly after here. Again, Stay Here for Life and Play, I have this really interesting back and forth structurally. And Play is kind of the moment where it does sort of feel like he's doing some self-reflection and some moments of like, it feels like he's looking at his previous self and just being like, wow, I'm just not there anymore. This lifestyle and this stuff that I was talking about, like, yeah, I like me my money and I like me my music and stuff, but I just don't value the same things anymore. I've moved on, and he does it in a way that still doesn't feel like he's changing or becoming a different ASAP Rocky. This feels like the same dude, and he's even like many of his luminaries right now, many of his contemporaries that are coming out and giving advice to people like, Kendrick or Nas. He's even on songs like, Stop Snitching, where he's just like, hey, all these guys in their music are telling on themselves. Do you remember why we do this? Hey, don't fucking do this or you're gonna end up in court. And I mean, if anyone would know the dangers of this particular thing, it's ASAP Rocky. And then there are moments on this album that I was really hoping would exist just because I feel like ASAP Rocky has the potential to experiment and do whatever he wants and do some weird shit. And we talked about the Bossa Nova hit, and then we also have songs like STFU where the dude's bringing in Flatlander Death Grip synths and it's fucking sick. Like,
It rocks.
it's awesome. It's a really like I was listening to it and I was just like, this, I would jam to this like I would a song on the second half of The Powers That Be. And it slams. Like, it's really successful. The production on this album, for the many genres and the many different sounds that it explores all of them extraordinarily well. Like, I don't really have a complaint at all with the way that this sounds. Like, this is an expensive, lush sounding record, and it sounds full. It's full of ideas, it's full of diversions, and this is what I wanted from Don't Be Dumb. I wanted something big. I wanted something that takes risks, but I wanted something rooted in a concept of some kind. And yeah, again, there are moments on the album where it feels like ASAP Rocky is kind of doing ASAP Rocky on default. Order of Protection and Helicopter are good baseline ASAP Rocky songs. I feel the same thing about The End to some extent. That's a moment where I feel like ASAP is trying to comment on the current moment and doesn't really do a great job of tying in the rest of the album to where this is. It almost feels like that would have been a better tone setter than a place to actually end things off on because it doesn't really provide a lot of personal resolution. But even then, that's still something I never would have predicted ASAP Rocky would even try. This is just an album that feels like its main priority was carving out a very specific place for itself in his oeuvre, which is what I've wanted him to be doing for like the last three albums. And so, for as mixed as some of this album can be, and for as, weird and eclectic, and how it doesn't really flow in a way that I feel like is super complimentary to the experience, just because it is very conceptual, probably a lot more than I anticipated it being, it's still full of ideas that I think are really successful, really fun, really interesting, and I kind of love it. It's weird and it's not fully successful, but again, this is a podcast where we value when people take swings, and he takes a lot of them, and he hits it more than he doesn't on here. I really think this is like borderline great in places.
Yeah, I mean, I do think this is great. Much of my favorite moments come in, yeah, the middle stretch of this record when it's starting to really mess around with those genre influences, because pretty much everything from STFU to the very end of the album is operating in completely different genre spaces. Even Air Force, when stood up
Yeah.
against all these other ones, it's a very traditional like hip hop, but it's pure fundamentals once that beat kicks in on Whiskey, and
Whew.
same with Air Force. That dirty South flow on that second verse on
Mm.
Air Force is wonderful.
Love it. I
Um,
fucking love it. Or fucking the fucking MF Doom ass storytelling song of him doing robbery with Doichi.
yeah.
Oh, oh man, that I adored that moment so much. Like Doichi, great as always 100% batting 1,000 with features, but their chemistry here is great. The way they set everything up, the way that it actually does, play out in a fashion that does feel like a storytelling song. It feels really classic hip hop. It for the many ways in which A$AP Rocky is definitely an innovator who's pushing his sound forward. He's also given it up to the greats, and I really, really admire and respect that.
Yeah, it's his adaptation of the opening scene of Pulp Fiction as a black dandy blaxploitation movie.
I would watch the shit out of a take on that, like basically a movie version of that starring Doichi and A$AP Rocky. That would be killer. I'd really, and I mean, not to mention that's a movie where the two leads would have a face card that would simply never decline. Like, goddamn.
I feel very positive on this.
I also really like how the kind of title of the album comes in at the 11th hour of like dumb, not necessarily being like, oh, being an idiot, but the idea of not speaking, as it's specifically said on the record. And I feel like that is, at the end of the day, what this album is that it's Rocky kind of unable to stay silent. It's not that, something is urging him to do it. It's just that because he is where he is in his life right now, he doesn't want to try and recapture the old days. He doesn't want to try and say something or do something that he's done before. He wants to actually go forward. And I feel like this album is plenty good evidence to the fact that we should take him on his word, that he does want to do that. And that is what he's doing. Like, this is something that, because of this record, I am going to be very interested in wherever Rocky goes from here on out. And I can't really necessarily say that that was the case beforehand, because again, my interest in his music was mostly aesthetic. I was kind of waiting for there to be a certain spice. And don't be dumb as many things, but it is no doubt it has the spice. In fact, a couple different spices. One could even argue maybe too many spices, but I'll take that over, just trying to do something that you've done before to prove that you can still do it, which is just, that it's fine when people do that, but
Yeah.
push yourself
We're
a
the
bit.
kind of people who find value in the branching out and the what you said about Quatica, right? Growing horizontally.
Yeah, and
That's what's
that's
happening here.
couldn't have said it better myself. I was just very pleased with the fact that I walked away from this not only positively, just because, I mean, again, as we talked about in our anticipated albums video, we were just kind of like, I'm just happy people are talking about this. I don't know how I'm going to feel about it, but now that I know where that single fits into the context of this, I'm probably going to return to a couple of these tracks throughout the year. And again, would not have predicted me saying that before I listened to this. So this is one of those many instances where I am absolutely thrilled to be proven wrong.
Wonderful.
So that's going to be it for today when it comes to reviews. News has kind of been light this week, so we are going to wait a little while until some more relevant stories maybe hit the headlines to come at you with a new Now episode. In the meantime, we'll be dropping plenty of stuff that we've got on the back burner, so look forward to some of that. If you want to support us, liking, commenting, subscribing, all of that typical YouTube stuff, joining us will get you access to some exclusive community posts and some videos that we are planning on doing for members only, should that interest you. I've got some stuff in the near future that I think will be putting into that category. And, well, until next time, folks, rock over London, rock on Chicago, live in your world, play in ours. PlayStation. That's
That's
so
really strange.
strange. That yeah, like I'm not the only one who thinks that's weird. Okay.